Why do some people not see a chance for salvation when there is still a chance to fix everything and live as if nothing had happened? I gave my wife several chances. These were the times when my wife could confess to me of infidelity, and there was a chance that I would forgive her, and we would stay together. But alas, the story acquired a different outcome. Steve, a 25-year-old bachelor, worked as a general laborer at a large construction company. His robust physique was a result of daily heavy lifting and regular visits to a local gym. His close friend Mike was a skilled car mechanic working in his father's garage, a profession he had been passionate about since kindergarten. One July 1st, Mike was invited to a Canada Day party by a loyal customer. Reluctant to attend alone and without his girlfriend, he persuaded Steve to join him. Steve, with no other plans for the evening, agreed. The party, held in a backyard, featured a makeshift dance floor on the patio, with loud music and ample alcohol. While Mike mingled, Steve sat quietly in a corner nursing a beer. A young woman, clearly inebriated, stumbled over and collapsed into a chair beside him, quickly downing her beer and letting out a burp. "Apologies," she muttered to Steve. "Take it easy, there's plenty of time," Steve responded calmly. "I'm celebrating," she declared. "We're all celebrating," Steve remarked. "No, I'm celebrating," she emphasized. "All right, you're celebrating," Steve said, smiling to himself, anticipating the inevitable hiccups. "Yes, I'm celebrating my breakup with my ex-boyfriend. He cheated on me," she announced before stumbling to the dance floor, where she began moving to the music with some difficulty. Steve sat nursing his beer, observing as two men from the patio joined the young woman on the dance floor. After a while, she left to get a whiskey, giving him a smile and a toast before downing the drink. He shook his head at her boldness before she returned to dancing. The two men edged closer, nearly encroaching on her space. "Hey, why are you just sitting here?" Mike nudged Steve. "Go mingle. There are plenty of girls around, and they're all eager." Steve glanced toward the dance floor but couldn't spot the woman or the men. He sprang from his seat. "What's happening?" Mike asked, bewildered. "I'm getting another beer," Steve replied, already heading towards the bar. Steve scanned the area in all directions, but his search was fruitless. Then he went to the front of the house. Cars were parked in the driveway and along the street. About 100 meters away, hidden in the shadows, he noticed someone kneeling near the open car door. Cautiously approaching, he witnessed a scene that caused him to flare up in anger. In the car, one man was holding her down, and the other was trying to do something. Despite her attempts to resist, the state of intoxication made her helpless. "Leave her alone and get out of here," thundered Steve's voice. "Come on, dude, if you don't like it, just leave," replied the man standing by the car, heading toward Steve. "You can join in the fun if you want." Steve acted quickly. He did not hesitate to kick the man hard, causing him to scream and bend over. Then Steve clenched his fist and hit the man with all his might. Then the attacker lost consciousness. Meanwhile, another larger man lunged at Steve. Despite his size, Steve dodged a direct blow to the face and responded with a powerful punch to the attacker's stomach. The impact knocked Steve to the ground, where the attacker grabbed him by the shirt and threw him against a nearby car when Steve hit the front door of the car. When the attacker lifted his foot to deliver another blow, Steve instinctively dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow that shattered the car window. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Steve delivered a strong kick to the man's unprotected left leg, causing him to lose his balance and collapse. Steve then attacked the man, hitting him, and stabbed him several times until he lost consciousness. Turning his attention to the young woman, Steve helped her recover and, carefully lifting her in his arms, carried her to his car. After putting her in the passenger seat, he searched her pockets and found a key with the inscription, "Eglinton Heights." Steve, familiar with the layout of the city from his work on various construction sites, wasted no time heading to the specified building. Upon arrival, He parked in the visitor's parking lot. Steve inquired about her apartment number as he roused her from sleep. What's your room number? Steve called out. 412, she murmured. Steve supported her as he guided her to the 4th floor. Once inside her room, he gently laid her on the bed and headed to the bathroom. He retrieved a bucket, then proceeded to the kitchen to prepare a mixture of salt and sugar dissolved in water. Encouraging her to drink some, he kept the bucket close at hand. Suddenly, she began to convulse and vomited into the bucket. Steve cleaned her mouth and helped her settle back down. 15 minutes later, he repeated the process with the drink, resulting in another round of vomiting. After several episodes, Steve undressed her and guided her into the bathroom, where he let cold water run over her. She lacked the strength to resist. After drying her off, he tucked her into bed, covering her with a blanket. Steve then settled into a chair beside the bed, watching over her as she slept. In the early morning, she woke up feeling awkward and, staring at the ceiling, tried to piece together the events of the previous night. Her heart started pounding when she noticed Steve sitting across from her. When she pulled back the blanket, she found that she was not wearing any clothes. "You attacked me," she screamed. "Calm down, Steve Rose. I really prevented 2 men from attacking you." "Who? 2 men? And why am I naked?" Then she noticed the bruises on Steve's knuckles and the redness on his face. "It's time to leave. I advise you to rest and refrain from drinking alcohol." Steve left the room. As clarity gradually returned to her, she recalled fragments of the previous night. A party, excessive alcohol consumption, 2 men dragging her into a car. There was a scuffle. Glass broke. "He saved me." She jumped out of bed, hurriedly pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, and ran out of the room. In the hallway, she heard the sound of the elevator door closing. She ran down the stairs and out into the street, but it was too late. All she saw was a young man driving away in his red Dodge Daytona. On the next Saturday evening, Steve and Mike were enjoying some beers at the local pub when Mike's phone rang. After listening to the caller, he turned to Steve and asked, "Do you know Tricia?" "No," Steve replied, taking another sip of his beer. "Well, there's someone on the line who claims she knows you, my best buddy. But you don't know her name," Mike explained. "Is she trying to sell something?" Steve wondered. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but my friend doesn't recognize you, and if this is a sales call, we're not interested," Mike responded into the phone. After a brief pause, he continued, "She mentioned being at a party last week and you taking her home." "Oh, her name's Tricia?" "I never asked," Steve said, taking the phone. "Is there something I should know?" Mike asked with a smile. Steve shook his head. "Hi, Tricia. What can I do for you this time?" Steve inquired. "Hi, first off, I just want to thank you for what you did last time. Without you, I don't know where I'd be right now or what condition I'd be in," Tricia expressed gratefully. "I just did what was necessary to help someone in trouble," Steve modestly replied. "No, you did what no one else would. You're my savior, my hero," Tricia insisted. "Thank you. And going forward, you should behave yourself, okay?" Steve advised. "Yes, I understand. I've been good since the party, and plan to stay that way," Tricia assured. "Great. By the way, how did you obtain Mike's phone number?" "I visited the house where the party was held and inquired about you, but no one recognized you. I provided your description and the type of car you were driving, but still no one had any information. This morning, the host of the party called me, suggesting that you might be a friend of Mike's, and provided me with his phone number." "All right, Tricia. It was pleasant chatting with you. I'm actually having a beer with Mike and—" "Are you available for dinner tomorrow?" Tricia interrupted. "Just want to express my gratitude in person," Tricia added. "Sure. I'll get your number from this phone and call you tomorrow morning. By the way, I'm Steve." They met for dinner on Sunday evening at an upscale restaurant. They avoided discussing the events of the party and instead talked about themselves and their occupations. Tricia worked as a data entry clerk in a supply chain corporate. Afterward, they went for a stroll, and finally, Steve drove her home. Thank you so much for this lovely evening, Steve. My hero. Tricia kissed Steve on the cheek and exited the car. He watched her walk to the main entrance of the building before driving away. 2 weeks later, Steve phoned Tricia, asking her to join him for a movie. After a brief conversation, Tricia confessed that she had been eagerly awaiting his call. I was waiting for yours too, Steve stuttered. Following the movie, Steve escorted Tricia back to her apartment where she invited him in for coffee. While in the cozy living dining room, Steve noticed a flyer for a tattoo parlor on the table. I've been considering getting a tattoo on my lower back, Tricia mentioned as she brought over 2 steaming cups of coffee. You don't need a tattoo, Steve responded. But I was thinking. I love your body just the way it is, Steve interjected. Yeah, you've seen me naked. Steve drew closer and planted a gentle kiss on her lips. Pulling away, he locked eyes with her. Someday I'll have to thank those 2 guys. Tricia hugged him tightly. Steve stroked her back, pulling her to him. He gently licked her ear, causing goosebumps to run down her back, and then showered kisses on her. He picked up Tricia in his arms, and Steve carried her to the bed. Everything happened too fast, and here they were, after the first round. Are you ready for the second round? He whispered. I'm ready until we both run out of steam, she replied. Steve didn't lose his head and went to the second round. After dating for a few months, they decided to tie the knot. They found a cozy 2-bedroom townhouse to rent and made it their own. Their happiness knew no bounds as they embarked on this journey together. A year later, Steve bumped into his old schoolmate Billy at a shopping mall. Billy was networking and distributing his business card to people. Hey, Billy, it's been ages, Steve greeted. Hi, Steve. Last time we caught up, we were just kids, Billy replied. What have you been up to? Steve inquired. I've switched careers since then. Got let go from my last job, Billy explained. Sorry to hear that. So what's your gig now? Saw you handing out cards, Steve observed. I'm self-employed, selling insurance, Billy responded. Huh? I'm a bit lost, Steve admitted. I'm not tied to any company. I work on commission, selling life insurance and investments, Billy clarified. Ah, got it, Steve nodded. And you? Married? Any kids? Billy asked. I'm with a construction firm. Yep, married but no kids yet. How about you? Steve answered. Married as well. No kids for me either, Billy shared. Great catching up, Billy. Got to run, my wife's waiting, Steve said. Oh. Before you go, ever thought about life insurance? What if something happens to you? Or when you have kids? Billy queried. Honestly, it never crossed my mind, Steve admitted. It's a common oversight. Here's my card. Talk to your wife, then give me a buzz. I'd be happy to swing by and chat. We usually do these meetings at home, together with both spouses. It's called a kitchen table talk. I'll explain everything about protection and future plans. Answer any questions you have, Billy explained. All right, I'll reach out soon, Steve replied, slipping the card into his pocket. That evening, following dinner, Steve briefed Tricia about Billy and suggested it would be beneficial for them both to heed his advice regarding life insurance and security. Tricia wasn't enthusiastic due to the additional monthly cost. We'll hear him out and then decide, Steve reassured his wife. We can arrange to meet him here next week. The subsequent week, Billy visited Steve and Tricia, elucidating the disparity between term and whole life insurance. He also recommended they begin investing for their retirement. Ultimately, Billy proposed a joint-term life insurance package tailored to their protection needs. Since they were still young, the monthly premiums would be minimal. A few days later, Billy returned with the policies to finalize the agreement. Before departing, he requested referrals and gave Tricia his business card. 3 months later, Tricia phoned Steve at his workplace. Hi, honey. I'll need to put in some overtime this week, and tonight I'll be done around 8. All right, no worries. I'll whip up dinner and wait for you. Thanks, dear. You're so thoughtful. After dinner, Tricia elaborated on the recent increase in workload and the company's reluctance to hire more staff. She worked overtime 3 times that week. 2 weeks later, she had to work overtime again. Steve didn't protest and prepared dinner instead. 6 months later, Steve found himself assigned to a construction site near Tricia's workplace. Around noon, he made the spontaneous decision to invite her to lunch. Arriving at her office, he was informed she had just stepped out for lunch. Spotting her car in the parking lot, Steve speculated that she might have walked to a nearby restaurant. Recalling a fond memory from their dating days when he had invited her to lunch at a quaint pizzeria just a 5-minute walk away, he quickly set off running. Steve caught sight of Tricia heading towards the pizzeria and attempted to call out to her, but the traffic drowned his voice. Upon entering the restaurant, he spotted Tricia and Billy seated at a table. "Hey, Steve," greeted Billy, attempting a smile. Tricia's initial shock quickly transformed into a smile. "I came here for some pizza and bumped into Steve." "Hey, Billy," Steve responded, still a bit puzzled. "I'm wrapping up and need to rush. I've got a meeting with potential clients in 15 minutes, said Billy as he stood and shook hands with Steve. "Good to see you, Tricia." Billy approached the counter, and Steve sensed his tension as he paid and engaged in a serious conversation with the cashier. Twice, the cashier glanced up at Steve and Tricia. "I'm working nearby and thought I'd drop by to see you and take you to lunch," Steve informed Tricia. "You should have called me. I would have waited for you, darling." As Billy passed their table, he waved goodbye and headed outside, where he got into a brand-new car. "Wow, he's really moving up in his new job," Steve remarked, watching his friend speed away. "Shall we order?" Tricia asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Is everything okay, Tricia?" "Absolutely, I just have 20 minutes left for lunch," she replied. On a Monday evening, while Tricia was working late, Steve decided to tackle their expenses to figure out their monthly savings potential. "It's about time we buy a house," he pondered, realizing they needed a substantial down payment. Tricia handled all the paperwork, neatly organized in the bottom drawer. Not wanting to wait for her, Steve delved into past bank statements, meticulously noting expenses. After an hour, he identified areas to cut back on. Returning the documents, he grabbed a beer from the kitchen to review his findings. Suddenly, he had a realization. Rushing back to the drawer, he scrutinized the statements. Tricia's income had remained unchanged for over a year. What about her overtime? Steve wondered. Something doesn't add up. She's been putting in extra hours for 6 months now, almost bi-weekly. Where's the extra money? As he returned the documents to their place, Steve opened another beer, contemplating. Either she's stashing the overtime pay elsewhere, or she's not really working those extra hours. Later, Steve heard Tricia's car reversing into the driveway. Upon her entry into the house, Steve was in the midst of sipping another beer. "You seem exhausted, hon," Steve remarked. "This job is exhausting me." "Why don't you search for a less demanding one?" "You know how hard it is to find a good-paying job these days," she retorted. "When's your next overtime?" "As usual on Wednesdays and Fridays." "I'll heat up the food." Steve got up and headed to the fridge. As they retired to bed, Tricia quickly fell into a deep sleep. Steve, however, lay awake, pondering. His mind was consumed with one question. Was his wife being unfaithful? The next day, he phoned Mike, the only person he trusted. "Hey, Mike, I need to meet with you this afternoon," he said with a grave tone. Mike, sensing his friend's distress, agreed without hesitation. "Let's catch up at the pub." On Wednesday evening, both friends sat in Mike's car across from Tricia's workplace, where her car was parked. They had been waiting for an hour. Eventually, 3 women, including Tricia, emerged from the building and headed to their cars. "Let's wait and see if any men come out," Steve suggested. They waited for 15 minutes, but no men appeared. Steve then sent Tricia a text message. "Gone to buy some beer." When Steve returned home with a pack of beer, he found that Tricia had already set the table. Friday evening, Mike was the sole observer of Tricia's activities. maintaining constant communication with Steve throughout. As usual, Tricia drove straight home. Later that night, while she was asleep, Steve seized her cell phone and thoroughly sifted through all messages and calls. On Saturday, the two friends reconvened to strategize. "I went through her phone, didn't find anything suspicious," Steve informed Mike. "She's probably wiping everything clean," Mike conjectured. "You might be right." "Look, Steve, if you're serious about uncovering the truth, you'll need to monitor her every move every day, but you don't have the time or expertise for that. And so your best bet is hiring a private investigator, but that'll cost you." "What else can I do?" Steve inquired. "I have an idea. Follow me." Mike escorted Steve to an electronics store and recommended purchasing 3 voice-activated recorders equipped with long-lasting batteries. That afternoon, Steve discreetly placed one in the kitchen near the home phone, one in the bedroom, and one under the passenger's seat in Tricia's car. Later, as they went to bed, Tricia attempted to initiate intimacy with her husband, but Steve rebuffed her, citing fatigue from a tough week. Disheartened, Tricia turned away and fell asleep. The next morning, Steve, as was his routine, headed to the gym. Upon his return, he discovered a note from Tricia explaining she had gone out for some errands. Suspecting something amiss, Steve checked the recording device in the kitchen. Aside from routine household sounds, there was nothing of significance. However, playback from the bedroom device revealed Tricia engaging in a one-sided phone conversation. "Hi, can we talk?" "She's in the backyard. Good. I miss you too, honey." He's gone to the gym. He'll be back by noon." "So, yes, I'm excited for this coming Wednesday. Of course, I will wear the black underwear you gave me." She chuckled. "You're right. This is the advantage of having flex time at work. Where are you taking me this time?" "You'll confirm tomorrow, but don't take me to Motel 6 like last time. I don't like it." "Okay, I need to go now. Talk to you tomorrow. Love you." Steve grappled with the recent revelation. He discovered he was being cheated on but remained oblivious to the identity of Tricia's lover, except for the fact that the man was married. This realization clarified why Tricia never received compensation for overtime. They were engaging in extramarital affairs on Wednesdays, often rendezvousing at Motel 6. Hurriedly, Steve retreated to the bedroom, stashing a recorder in its usual hiding spot. Rummaging through drawers, he unearthed provocative lingerie concealed amid Tricia's belongings. Outraged, he exclaimed, "The deceit!" Determined to unveil the man's identity and their upcoming plans, Steve enlisted Mike's help, briefing him on his discoveries. That evening, Steve feigned exhaustion, masking his turmoil. Sleep evaded him as he fretted over the possibility of Tricia's lover contacting her at work. Come Monday morning, as Tricia occupied the bathroom, Steve retrieved the recorder from the kitchen, stealthily placing it at the bottom of her handbag. This might do the trick, he pondered. Throughout the day, Steve's thoughts fixated on Tricia and her clandestine rendezvous. He concocted various schemes, prepared for the worst-case scenario of tailing them with a car borrowed from Mike's shop come Wednesday. Upon arriving home in the afternoon, Steve noticed Tricia bustling about in the kitchen. Without hesitation, he retreated to the bedroom, where he retrieved a recorder discreetly tucked inside her handbag. Next, he quietly took her car keys and retrieved another recorder hidden beneath the car seat. Opting to listen to the latter first, anticipating hours of recordings on the one from her bag, he informed Tricia, "I'll be listening to some music on the computer. Give me a heads up once dinner's ready." With headphones on, he immersed himself in the morning's commute to her workplace for about 30 minutes, capturing the hum of the engine and the radio's chatter. Then, a brief silence was interrupted by the opening and closing of a door, followed by Tricia's voice. "Hey, sorry I couldn't pick up earlier. My boss was around and things got hectic." "Lake Simcoe? A cabin on the lake with a private beach? That sounds amazing." "It belongs to one of your clients? You're doing great business, Billy." Steve's expression darkened as he continued listening. Maybe one day I should join you and sell insurance. Yes, and investments too. I promise you, Billy, this time you'll have my full attention. I've kept it untouched, even from Steve. It'll be yours, and yours alone. As usual, I'll leave my car in the same spot and ride with you. I have to get back to work now. Bye, darling. With newfound clarity on Tricia's affair and their intended rendezvous, Steve wasted no time and dialed Mike. After dinner, he informed Tricia that he was heading to the pub to meet Mike for a drink. Make sure you're not late, Tricia reminded her husband. In reality, both friends rendezvoused in a parking lot. After Steve divulged everything to Mike, the latter inquired about his scheme. I thought about surprising them on their return trip, like giving them 4 flat tires. They should have coordinated their departure from Lake Simcoe so Tricia would arrive home around her usual time from work. It would stress them out. By the time she got home, I'd be gone with all my stuff. I'll send a recording to Billy's wife and find a cheap lawyer to divorce that woman. It's a solid plan, but someone needs to tail them to find out where the cabin is and discreetly tamper with all the tire valves, Mike reminded Steve. I know it's complicated, but I can't come up with anything else. What car does he have? Mike inquired. Steve informed him. Ah, that crappy thing, why? Mike exclaimed. What do you mean? Steve was puzzled. You'll see. I bet in a couple of months that model will be recalled. Why? Steve asked. There's an issue with the suspension. A few loose bolts could wreck the car. Steve grinned. You're not suggesting... Yes, that's exactly what we need. Can you make sure they get stuck there? Lake Simcoe is over 100 miles from Toronto. With my skills, I can loosen the bolts slightly, so after about 150 miles, everything will start shaking, and the jerk will have to stop, confused. He'll have to call for a tow. But how will I pull it off? I have an idea. Steve smirked cunningly. By the time Steve got home, Tricia was fast asleep. He went to search for the jerk's business card. On Tuesday morning, Steve phoned Billy from work asking if he could visit that evening for investment advice, as he had some money to invest. Although Billy had a client appointment at 7 p.m. and initially wanted to reschedule, Steve insisted. Eventually, Billy agreed to come over at 9 p.m. Steve promptly texted Tricia about Billy's visit, seeking investment advice. During lunch, Tricia called Steve, expressing concerns about their saving habits and asking about his investment plans. Hey, I was planning to surprise you, but since you asked, I'm expecting a significant raise soon, Steve replied. That's fantastic. We should celebrate, Steve attempted enthusiasm. Yeah, we'll discuss it, Tricia replied. Am I still your hero? Steve asked. Of course you are, Tricia affirmed. Lying bitch, Steve thought after hanging up. Later that evening at 9:30 p.m., Billy arrived at the house. Steve welcomed him in, and Tricia greeted her lover warmly. Unnoticed by the couple, Steve turned off all exterior lights. The three of them sat down, and Billy began explaining the benefits of mutual funds. Simultaneously, Mike, parked on the street, strolled over to Billy's car equipped with a professional lift service jack. In the darkness, he remained unnoticed. Swiftly, he raised the car, slipping underneath with a wrench and a cloth to cover his tracks. With precision, he knew which bolts to loosen, concealing them with the cloth to prevent any telltale signs. Steve sensed the silent communication between them, even noticing their subtle foot contact beneath the table. Pretending not to observe, Steve continued the conversation. Billy selected a few investment options and left some brochures on the table. Steve fetched 2 beers, overhearing murmurs behind him. Simultaneously, he received a text from Mike. Mission accomplished. Steve grinned. You mentioned your wife's workplace last time, but it slipped my mind. Steve evaded Billy's gaze. Jenny works at RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, downtown. You two make quite the team. If I don't invest with you, I might as well invest with your wife. All three chuckled. After finishing his beer, Steve informed his friend that he'd review the brochures and his suggestions, promising to call in a few days to confirm everything. Once Billy departed, Steve poured himself a glass of whiskey. "Care for some wine, darling?" Steve inquired of Tricia. "You're aware I don't drink alcohol anymore," Tricia retorted, almost shouting. "I know, just checking," Steve replied. "And you know you can't handle mixing beer and whiskey." "I'm just celebrating, honey." "Well, if you get too drunk, please sleep on the couch tonight," Tricia said, turning to head upstairs to the bedroom. Steve pushed back his chair and sat down, not taking his eyes off the glass in front of him, which he had not touched. Thoughts raced through his mind as he replayed the scene between his wife and her lover in his head. He realized that his marriage was over. An hour passed while he sat and thought. In the end, he poured most of the whiskey into the sink, leaving only a little in the glass. Standing at the kitchen sink, he rinsed his mouth with the rest of the whiskey. When he entered the bedroom, he found Tricia sleeping on her stomach, wearing her usual t-shirt. He lifted her t-shirt, covering her with kisses. Suddenly, Tricia woke up. "Steve, what are you up to?" "Relax, baby, it's okay." Tricia tried to move away, but Steve wouldn't let her. "You reek of alcohol. Leave me alone." "No." Tricia defended herself. "Stop it. I am your husband, your protector. I have every right. Please, darling, I'm so tired. I have a hard day tomorrow. We can do it another time." "A whole day with your beloved, right?" Steve was seething with rage, saying these phrases to himself. He decided that he could go further, so he wanted what every man dreams of. "No, please don't do this to me," Tricia pleaded. After a few minutes, Steve lay back satisfied. "Why? Why did you do this to me with your wife?" Tricia started crying. "I've wanted to do this for so long and you've always refused me," Steve replied callously. He let her go to the bathroom where he heard her crying. "She's crying because I did it before her lover did." Steve chuckled to himself. He followed Tricia into the bathroom and stood next to her under the running water. But as soon as he entered, she left. After tidying himself up, he returned to the bedroom and found Tricia curled up in the fetal position. "You hurt me," Tricia sobbed. "Hush," Steve muttered, hugging her and trying to calm her down. "Don't touch me," she exclaimed, forcefully pushing his hand away. Steve decided to go for the second round. "You're mine. I'm marking you as my property," he declared, while Tricia, confused, was silent. Then he went to the second round. "You belong to me," he declared, venting his anger at her, and after a couple of minutes he completed his round. After that he dressed, retired to the guest bedroom, and locked the door behind him. The next morning, when Tricia got ready to leave, she looked exhausted and tied a scarf to hide the marks on her neck. With red eyes indicating a sleepless night, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Will you be back after work?" Steve asked. After lingering for a while, Tricia opened the door without waiting for an answer. "Are you going to come home later?" Steve pressed on. Turning to him with tears in her eyes, Tricia replied, "You are my husband. This is our home. Where else could I go?" "Do you want to discuss last night?" he insisted. Shaking her head, Tricia muttered, Not now, I'm late," before leaving. As Tricia was leaving, Steve was thinking to himself, "She'd rather meet her lover than talk to her husband. Does she really care so much about me? What did I do to deserve such an attitude towards me?" Upon arrival at work, Steve got a call from Mike. "Hi, Steve, I followed her like you said. She parked in the mall next to her office and waited for the guy. As soon as he arrived, she got into his car and they headed north." "Thanks, Mike. I'll keep you informed about what's going on between Tricia and me." Meanwhile, his wife was already in the car. "Why are you so reserved? You seem distracted. Aren't you excited?" Billy asked anxiously as they drove along the highway. "This is Steve." "What's wrong with him?" "He was incredibly assertive last night. It's not like him." "What do you mean by assertiveness?" "He said things like I was his property, I belonged to him." Tricia confessed, taking off her scarf. "Oh, shit!" "And It's all because of me. He left his mark on me. This morning, when I was leaving, he asked if I would come home after work. Does he suspect something? Does he suspect something? I don't know. We were careful. Perhaps he feels neglected. Perhaps I unknowingly failed to meet his expectations. Don't blame yourself, Tricia. But he doesn't deserve it. I'm cheating on him with his friend. It's just a physical attraction between us. You love him. I know, but he won't understand. Do you want to go back? No, I just need a break, but without intimacy. I'm still in pain. I hope you understand. No problem. Thanks, Billy. They should be at their destination by now or somewhere nearby. Steve glanced at his watch. Will she give herself to Billy after what happened last night? He thought about it. He glanced at his watch from time to time, unable to get the image of Billy and his cheating wife out of his head. I can't wait for this day, he thought to himself. Suddenly, a sly smile appeared on his face. He asked his boss for a long coffee break, citing important personal matters. Arriving at the cottage, Billy saw Tricia impatiently jump out of the car and rush to the serene lake. It's so beautiful and peaceful here, Tricia said, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. I finally see you smiling, Billy said, smiling back. Come here. Hug me tight. They hugged for a while before Billy suggested a walk along the beach. They were walking hand in hand, but Tricia's phone call broke the silence. Glancing at the caller ID, she ignored the call. Steve? Asked Billy. Tricia nodded. A few moments later, the phone rang again. This time, Tricia turned it off. Steve shouted from his car. I'm sure that jerk is right with her. He dialed another number. Mike, I need another favor from you, buddy. What if he calls your workplace? Billy inquired. I hadn't considered that, Trish admitted with a frown. I'll just say I took a personal day after what he did to me last night. Simultaneously, Billy's phone rang. I don't recognize this number, he informed Tricia. Better not answer, she advised. It could be someone from headquarters or a potential client, Billy reasoned, tapping the green phone icon. Before he could even greet the caller, a male voice spoke. Could you please ask Tricia to take her husband's call? The line went dead. Billy stood frozen, the phone still at his ear. What happened? Who was it? Tricia appeared distressed. It was a man, Billy stuttered, whose voice I didn't recognize. What did he say? Tricia grasped his shoulders and shook him. He told you to take Steve's call. Oh my God, he knows everything. Tricia trembled. We have to go and turn on your phone. He rushed back to the car and Tricia followed him. She turned on her cell phone and it rang immediately. Is it him? Billy asked, looking worried. Answer it. Steve, please, it's not what you think. Let me explain, Tricia cried. There's nothing to explain, Steve yelled through the phone. Billy could hear him. I've known everything for weeks. Your flexible hours at work, your day off next week for your rendezvous. You're even wearing the black underwear he bought for you. Please, Steve, just listen to me. Enough, you disgrace. Listen up. Does he realize I've already had you? Now he can have you too. I'm tossing your stuff out and meeting with a lawyer today armed with evidence. Steve, please. Let's talk. No. It's done between us. Tricia burst into tears. I had someone tail you, Steve fabricated. Your little rendezvous at Motel 6? Recorded. I've got copies. You could star in your own movie, Tricia. Tricia glanced at Billy, horrified. I love you, Steve. Don't push me away. Stop with the lies, Tricia. Is this what you call love? I'm sorry, Steve. Please, just give me another chance. Sorry? For what? I gave you a chance this morning, and you still went to see your lover. Now tell that jerk I know where his wife Jenny works. I'm heading there with a copy of the DVD. He better meet me at the bank in 40 minutes. I want him to explain why I shouldn't show Jenny the film. 40 minutes, not a second longer. Steve hung up and powered off his phone. Steve understood that in moments of panic, clarity was rare. Billy was in complete disarray when Tricia informed him of Steve's intentions. "Get in the car," he shouted at Tricia. "Try to reach him and persuade him not to meet Jenny." "He's turned off his phone," Tricia sobbed. "Try calling this guy," Billy instructed, redialing and handing Tricia his phone. "It's Mike, his best friend," Tricia noted, glancing at the screen. But Mike didn't answer. "Let me try from my phone," Tricia suggested. "Damn it! He switched off his phone too." Billy was speeding at 100 kilometers per hour. "You won't make it there in 40 minutes, Billy." "I have to. I can't let him ruin everything I've built." Tricia looked at him incredulously. "Why not call Jenny?" "I can't stress her out. She's 8 months pregnant." "Damn it." As they hit the highway, Billy accelerated to over 150 kilometers per hour. "Who does he think he is? Your pathetic excuse for a husband?" Billy clutched the steering wheel in desperation. "He's not a coward, Billy. He's just worthless, unable to satisfy his wife." These words hurt deeply. "He's the most beautiful man I've ever known." "Really? And yet you ended up in bed with me. Why?" "Billy," Tricia snapped, "don't act like I'm the only one you've cheated on. You're disgusting. If I had known—" "If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else," Billy interrupted. "I'm sorry I called you back at all," Tricia said, tears streaming down her face. "But you didn't regret it when you were in bed with me, did you?" Billy was speeding at 200 km/h, occasionally swerving between lanes to dodge vehicles ahead. "I really hope we don't arrive and Steve hands the DVD to your wife, who fails to fulfill her husband." "Could you please be quiet?" Billy shouted. "She's worthless, driving her husband to seek satisfaction elsewhere. You have no idea what you're saying. I'm certain I'm not the first person you've cheated with, jerk. If you keep nagging, I'll pull over and kick you out of the car." At the same time, the car suddenly shook and he trembled all over. Trish and Billy exchanged startled glances as he tried to slow down and pull the car away, but it wouldn't budge. The car crashed into a guardrail and overturned. Both passengers screamed when the airbags went off. The car crashed into a tree with deadly force. A branch smashed the windshield, pierced the airbags where Billy was. Tricia only suffered injuries from being hit by a branch. The car was so mangled that it would have taken firefighters several hours to remove them. Later that day, Steve got a call from the police and was informed that his wife had been in a car accident. She was being treated at South Lake Hospital in Newmarket, a town north of Toronto. He feigned shock and concern by asking a few questions before being advised to go to the hospital. He hurriedly drove to Mike's house to share the news, causing Mike to worry and panic. "What if the authorities discover that someone tampered with the bolts?" Mike inquired. "They won't, and you've taken all the necessary precautions. There's nothing linking us to the car. We should just keep quiet," came the response. "You knew the risks when you had me make that call this morning." "I had a hunch." "You're despicable," Mike shouted. "I did what was necessary." "What's the plan now?" "You'll drive me to Newmarket. I don't want the police to find a stressed-out husband driving alone, and most importantly, I need to play my part." An hour later, a nurse led Steve to the waiting room. After a few minutes, 2 policemen approached and took seats beside him. "Do you know Billy Wilson?" asked policeman number 1. "Yes, he's a friend from high school and also our financial advisor," Steve replied calmly. "Is he on good terms with your wife?" policeman number 2 inquired. "I'm not sure what you are asking." "I mean, is their relationship more than just friendship?" "I don't understand, officer," Steve frowned. "Were you aware that they were having an affair?" policeman number 1 pressed. "No, that can't be. Tricia wouldn't cheat on me." "She wouldn't do that." Steve stood up. "I need to see her. I need to see my wife. Where is she? Your wife is in intensive care, policeman number 1 informed him. I was only told she was injured in an accident. What happened? Why is she in intensive care? She was in a car crash with Billy Wilson. Witnesses say he was speeding towards Toronto. He died instantly and your wife is seriously injured. Before losing consciousness, she said, "Tell Steve I'm sorry. Forgive me." Steve broke down in tears. The nurse guided Steve down the hallway. "The doctor wants to see you," she said, pointing. "Third door on your right." "I'm Dr. Martino. I'm sorry about your wife's accident. Please, take a seat." Steve wiped his eyes. "To alleviate her pain, we've heavily sedated her," the doctor explained. "What I have to tell you isn't easy. You need to be strong." Steve met the doctor's gaze, waiting for him to continue. "Your wife has lost her left foot and right eye. She has broken ribs and internal organ damage. Her head sustained a severe blow. I'm sorry. There's no hope for recovery." Steve looked down, shaking his head. "She's on life support. The decision is yours alone," the doctor added. "When can I speak to her?" Steve asked, his voice cracking. "She can't see or speak, but she can hear." Simultaneously, a nurse entered the office, delivering documents to the doctor. After reviewing and signing various pages, he passed them to Steve. "Please review these to ensure accuracy. Once you've decided, print your name and sign beside mine on the dotted line. You'll need a pen." He provided one to Steve. Entering the room, Steve found Tricia broken and lying in bed, connected to machines and monitors. Sitting beside her, he said, "It's me, Steve." Tricia struggled to move her hand toward him. "I won't touch you. You're injured, and things look bad. This is the consequence of your actions, Tricia. If you hadn't been involved with Billy, we wouldn't be here." Tears streamed down her face. "By the way, he died in the accident." The monitor displayed an irregular pattern. "I fought for you, Tricia. I took blows to shield you, risking my life. You saw me as your hero, and this is what I get. You betraying me." Tricia attempted to speak but couldn't. "If you no longer loved me, you should have been honest. I would have understood and let you go. But instead, you chose to deceive me, manipulate my emotions, and betray my trust. Thankfully, we don't have children together. And now you expect me to forgive you? How can I?" With fury, Steve grabbed the document and signed where necessary. "He entered my home to sell life insurance and ended up stealing my wife." Tricia struggled to breathe. "I'm going to end this. It's for the best." Steve gritted his teeth. "Once more, I'll never forgive you. Rot in hell, you deceitful person." Steve stood up and leaned in close to her ear. "I sabotaged his car last night, and soon I'll collect on your life insurance policy," he whispered. The monitors went haywire, sounding alarms. Dr. Martino and 2 nurses rushed into the room. Steve handed the documents to the doctor and nodded before exiting the room.